You are about to be shocked when you learn how people slept during the Victorian era. What they had to do to survive the night is shocking. I will now tell you all the details. Imagine a quiet, dark night. You are lying in your warm, cozy bed, covered with a blanket in your own room. This seems like the absolute norm to us, a basic comfort without which it is impossible to imagine our lives. But what if I told you that the very idea of a private bedroom is a luxury that has only recently become available to most people? Just a century and a half ago, in the Victorian era, nighttime was not a time for rest, but an hourly struggle for survival. And the main battlefield was the shared family bed. Watch the video to the end to find out why sleeping in the same bed with the whole family was not a tradition, but a harsh necessity, and what unwritten rules existed in this crowded space. I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of that era. The main enemy of the Victorian poor was not hunger or disease in the usual sense. It was a silent, invisible, and pervasive enemy. The cold, which turned their own homes into icy traps. We are used to thinking of houses as fortresses that protect us from the elements. But for millions of people in Victorian England, their homes were nothing more than flimsy barriers. They protected them from rain and wind, but were powerless against the piercing cold. In those days, there was no central heating, and the only source of heat was a fireplace or a small stove. This hearth could only heat a tiny space around itself. The rest of the room, not to mention the whole house, remained in the grip of the cold. At night, when the fire in the hearth died down, the temperature inside the house began to drop rapidly. It often fell to almost the same level as outside. The walls froze through, and a thick layer of frost formed on the inside of the window panes. For the inhabitants of such houses, every night became a test of endurance. The cold was not just uncomfortable, it was a constant threat to health and life itself. It crept under clothing and penetrated to the very bones. People slept in the same clothes they wore during the day, and sometimes even in their outerwear. They pulled on all the clothes they had, trying to create at least some kind of air layer. But even multiple layers of clothing could not save them from the damp, freezing air. The warmth of the human body became the only reliable source of heat. This simple physical phenomenon formed the basis of the main survival strategy. People realized that the only way to survive the night was to combine their warmth. Thus, the shared bed turned from a place to sleep into a collective lifeboat. Each family member became a hot water bottle for another. This was not a whim or a strange tradition, but a vital tactic. That is why sleeping alone in an unheated room was not a luxury, but a deadly, dangerous activity. People instinctively sought each other's warmth, just as they seek a source of water in the desert. Survival was a collective task. I'm very interested to hear your point of view. What do you think about how modern heating technologies have changed our perception of home and comfort? Write about it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Are you ready to learn the truth about how homes were built in the Victorian era? To understand the scale of the problem, you need to look at the typical home of a poor urban family. These houses, built quickly and cheaply at the height of the Industrial Revolution, were true architectural conductors of cold. The walls of such buildings were usually constructed of a single layer of brick. They had no insulation and quickly lost the heat accumulated during the day. The cold from the outer wall could literally be felt physically just by touching it. The windows were another weak point. Huge, but with only one thin pane of glass, they were the main source of heat loss. The frames were usually dry and leaky, allowing icy drafts to pass through. The fireplace, which we consider a symbol of comfort, was actually an extremely inefficient device. More warm air escaped from the house through the wide chimney than the fire itself provided. As soon as the flames died down, the chimney turned into a channel for cold air from the street. The floors on the first floors were often stone or earth without any covering. They constantly gave off dampness and cold. Wooden floors were not much better. The gaps between the boards let in drafts from the basement. The absence of internal corridors was the norm. The rooms were arranged in a row, one after the other. This meant that in order to get to the farthest room, you had to walk through all the previous ones, letting in cold air. The roofs often leaked, and the attics were not insulated. This led to constant dampness, which made the cold even more penetrating. Humid air cools the body much faster than dry air. In such conditions, retaining heat was practically impossible. Any heat generated by the hearth or people's bodies instantly dissipated. The house did not accumulate heat, but constantly gave it away to the outside. It was this imperfect architecture that dictated the rules of survival. Since it was impossible to heat the house, there was only one thing left to do: keep each other warm. Physics was relentless, and people obeyed its laws. But how did people relate to personal space, which in essence did not exist in such conditions? What if I told you that the very concept of privacy was alien to them? Read on to the next chapter, and you will find out why the bedroom was not an intimate space, but a passageway. What if I told you that everything you believed about the family structure of the past is untrue? Modern people perceive the bedroom as a purely personal, intimate space. But to the Victorian poor, this idea would have seemed strange and incomprehensible. The very concept of a separate bedroom for each family member was a sign of wealth. In most homes, 1 or 2 rooms served all functions at once. This is where people cooked, ate, worked, and slept. The boundaries between public and private were blurred. Life took place in full view of all members of the household. The idea of privacy was an unaffordable luxury that no one even dreamed of. The bed was not so much a personal space as a piece of furniture for collective use. It was the central element of the room, around which daily life was built. It was the warmest and safest island in the whole house. Sleeping together was not perceived as something shameful or wrong. It was as normal as eating together at the same table. From an early age, people got used to constant physical contact with others. No one thought about psychological discomfort or violation of personal boundaries. Much more important things were at stake: health and survival. In such conditions, social conventions took a back seat. Moreover, sleeping together strengthened the sense of community and interdependence. People literally felt like they were part of a single whole, warming and protecting each other. This created strong emotional bonds. Privacy was a privilege that only the upper and middle classes could afford. It was in their circles that modern ideas about home, family, and personal life began to take shape. These ideas were foreign to the working class. Thus, crowded family beds were not only a consequence of poverty and cold, they were a reflection of a completely different social structure. People lived more densely, more closely, and were much closer to each other in the truest sense of the word. This reality is radically different from our modern ideas. It forces us to take a fresh look at the history of everyday life and to understand how much our basic ideas about comfort and normality have changed. What you are about to learn will turn your understanding of life in the past upside down. Why couldn't people simply heat their homes better? The answer lies in simple and ruthless economics. Heat cost money, and most people simply didn't have that money. The main fuel in cities was coal. It was more efficient than wood, but it had to be purchased. For a family whose budget was already stretched thin, the cost of coal was a huge expense. The price of coal could fluctuate greatly depending on the season and supply. In winter, when it was most needed, prices skyrocketed. Many families simply could not afford to buy enough. Heating even one room throughout the day required a significant amount of fuel. Therefore, the fire in the hearth was kept burning only during waking hours, and at night it was extinguished, saving every piece of coal. Heating several rooms was an unthinkable luxury. The whole life of the family was concentrated in the one room where the hearth was located. Usually it was the kitchen or the common room. Everyone gathered here in the evenings to stay warm before going to their cold bedrooms. Sometimes families went to extreme lengths to obtain fuel. They might collect coal dust from railways or ports. Any combustible material found on the street was put to use. Even buying warm clothes and blankets was a problem. High-quality woolen items were expensive. Often, people had to make do with old, worn-out clothes that did not protect them well from the cold. In such a situation, the warmth of the human body was the only free resource. It did not need to be purchased, and it could not be stolen. Utilizing this resource was the most rational economic decision. Sleeping together was, in essence, a form of economy. It reduced fuel costs and kept people from freezing at night. It was a harsh but effective business model for survival. But what did the sleeping space that had to accommodate so many people look like? In the next chapter, you will learn what a Victorian poor man's bed consisted of. How comfortable do you think it was? A bed for a poor Victorian family had little in common with our modern ideas of comfort. Often it was a simple wooden or iron frame, but even the presence of such a frame was considered a certain level of prosperity. Many families did not have a bed at all. They slept on the floor in the corner of the room, on straw or old rags. It was the coldest and dampest place in the house. The mattress, if there was one, was a large bag made of coarse fabric. It was stuffed with the cheapest and most affordable material. Most often it was straw, which had to be changed periodically. Over time, the straw would clump together, crumble, and turn to dust. Such a mattress was hard, lumpy, and completely uncomfortable, but at least it created some kind of layer between the body and the cold boards of the bed. Instead of sheets, any available pieces of fabric were often used. Pillows were a luxury. They were replaced by clothes rolled into a knot or simply by resting one's head on one's arm. The most valuable item was a blanket, but even that was rarely a real wool blanket. More often than not, it was a collection of various items. Anything that could provide even a little warmth was used. Old coats, coal sacks, worn-out clothes, pieces of carpet. All of this was laid in layers on top of the sleepers. The weight of such a blanket was considerable. It weighed down on the sleepers, but at the same time did not retain heat, well due to its heterogeneous structure. But there was no choice. Maintenance of such a sleeping place was minimal. Bedding was rarely washed and aired. It accumulated dust and dampness, becoming a breeding ground for problems. Despite all these inconveniences, the bed was the center of nightlife. It was the place where one could feel relatively safe from the night cold. It was here that the daily drama of the struggle for survival unfolded. Guess what happened next? Going to bed in a Victorian family was a whole ritual, subject to one goal: to preserve as much heat as possible. Each step was thought out and refined by generations. It all started at the dying hearth. Before going to bed, a brick or a large flat stone was placed in the coals. Over the course of several hours, it heated up considerably, turning into an improvised hot water bottle. Then this hot brick was carefully removed and wrapped in several layers of thick fabric. It was placed in bed sometime before bedtime. It heated the mattress and blankets, creating a warm spot in the icy bed. Wealthier families could afford a special metal hot water bottle for the bed. It was a flat, closed vessel with a long handle. Hot coals from the fireplace were poured inside, and the warmer was passed under the blankets several times. People went to bed without undressing. They only took off their shoes and perhaps the top layer of dirty work clothes. Sleeping in a nightgown was a privilege unavailable to most. The arrangement in bed was strictly regulated. Usually the youngest and weakest members of the family were placed in the center, in the warmest place. Adults lay at the edges, taking on the brunt of the cold. They lay very close to each other, trying to maximize the area of contact. People often slept on their sides, in a spooning position. This allowed them to warm each other effectively. They tried to cover their heads with blankets or wore bonnets and hats at night. A significant amount of heat is lost through the head, and people intuitively understood this. They breathed cold air but tried to keep their bodies warm. At night, they tried to move as little as possible. Every movement disturbed the layer of warm air that had formed under the blanket. Everyone slept lightly, trying not to disturb each other. But how did they manage to share a bed not only with relatives, but also with complete strangers? In the next chapter, you will find out who else could end up in the family bed. How do you think this affected everyday life? In addition to family members, other people could often be found in Victorian beds. Renting out a sleeping place or even part of a bed was a common way to earn extra money. In overpopulated cities, every inch of space had its price. Many families rented out beds to lodgers. These could be single workers who had come to the city to earn money. They paid a small weekly fee for the right to sleep under a roof. Often, the lodger slept in the same bed as the family. His place was strictly defined, usually at the very edge. It was uncomfortable, but the alternative was sleeping on the street. There was even a practice of shift bed rental. A day worker slept in it at night, and a night worker, such as a baker or a watchman, took his warm place during the day. The bed, thus, worked around the clock. For the family, the lodger was a source of stable, albeit small, income. This money could be used to pay rent or buy food. Therefore, they turned a blind eye to the inconveniences associated with the presence of a stranger. In artisan families, it was normal for an apprentice to live in his master's house. He ate at the common table and often slept in the same bed with the master's household. This was part of his training and maintenance. Such cohabitation required certain rules to be followed. Everyone understood the need to respect the space of others, even if it was minimal. Conflicts that arose were resolved peacefully so as not to lose housing or income. The presence of outsiders further blurred the boundaries between the personal and the public. The house became a kind of dormitory or inn. People got used to the constant presence of strangers. This practice shows how desperate the struggle for survival was. Basic needs, a roof over one's head and warmth, were so important that people sacrificed everything we now call comfort and privacy for them. Sleeping with strangers was the norm, dictated by economic necessity. It was another detail in the picture of everyday life in the Victorian era, full of deprivation and compromise. Living in such cramped conditions required unwritten rules and norms of behavior. This kind of etiquette for sleeping together allowed people to avoid conflicts and made coexistence a little more bearable. All participants in this nightly ritual understood the importance of following these rules. The main rule was to remain still. As already mentioned, any unnecessary movement let cold air under the shared blanket. Therefore, people tried to sleep peacefully without tossing and turning and disturbing their neighbors. Everyone knew their territory. Despite the cramped conditions, there were invisible boundaries. Taking up more space than you were entitled to, pushing others aside, was considered the height of selfishness and disrespect. Certain hygiene rules were observed as far as possible. People tried to go to bed without at least their outer, dirtiest clothes and shoes. Cleanliness was the key to overall health. Talking in bed was discouraged. Night was a time for rest and recuperation. Excessive noise could wake others, and everyone understood this. If someone needed to get up at night, they did so as quietly and carefully as possible. Upon returning, they tried to warm up as quickly as possible without taking heat away from others. This was a manifestation of mutual care. Despite physical proximity, social distance was maintained. People slept close together, but that did not mean they were on familiar terms. Relationships were governed by strict rules of decorum. This etiquette was instilled from an early age. People learned to be attentive to the needs of others. They understood that their own survival depended directly on the well-being of the whole group. Such forced closeness fostered tolerance and the ability to compromise. Selfish behavior in such conditions was simply impossible. The community implicitly condemned those who did not follow the common rules. These unwritten laws transformed a chaotic gathering of people into a single, well-coordinated organism. It functioned every night, united by a common goal: to survive the cold and wait for morning. The practice of communal sleeping, dictated by necessity, began to slowly fade into the past only at the end of the Victorian era and the beginning of the 20th century. This was due to a number of profound social and technological changes. Gradually, people's lives became a little easier. One of the key factors was the improvement in housing conditions. Better quality houses began to be built for workers in cities. New building standards provided for thicker walls and better protection from the weather. Fuel gradually became cheaper. The development of railways made coal deliveries more regular and affordable. More and more families could afford to heat not just one room, but several, at least during the coldest months. The growth in real incomes also played a role. People were able to spend more money on improving their living conditions. Buying a separate bed or an extra blanket was no longer an unthinkable luxury. At the same time, public attitudes toward hygiene and privacy were changing. Under the influence of the middle class, new ideas about proper home design were spreading. The ideal became a family where the parents had their own bedroom. Doctors and social reformers began to actively talk about the dangers of overcrowding and sleeping together. They linked this practice to the spread of disease. Public opinion began to change. Of course, this process was very slow and uneven. In the poorest strata of society and in remote rural areas, old traditions persisted for a very long time. But the general direction of change was clear. The advent of new, more efficient stoves and heating appliances accelerated this transition. Technological progress gradually made homes warmer and more comfortable. Dependence on the warmth of human bodies decreased. By the middle of the 20th century, sleeping together as a family in one bed had become an anomaly rather than the norm in developed countries. What had been a survival strategy for Victorians became a distant and almost forgotten past. The decline of this tradition symbolized a fundamental shift in living standards. It showed how much technology and economics influenced the most intimate aspects of our lives. The private bedroom became a symbol of a new era. The story of cold nights and shared beds is not just an interesting fact from the past. It is a powerful reminder of how long and difficult the road to our modern comforts has been. We often take for granted what was an unattainable dream for our ancestors. This practice shows the incredible resilience and adaptability of humans. In the harshest conditions, people found simple and effective solutions for survival. They used the only resource available to them, themselves. Studying this aspect of Victorian life allows us to better understand the social structure of the time. It reveals the huge gap that existed between the poor and the rich. For some, there were cold nights. For others, warm bedrooms with fireplaces. It is also a story of community and interdependence. Survival was not an individual task, but a collective one. People relied on each other in the most literal, physical sense, warming and protecting each other. Today, we live in a world of individualism, where personal space is valued above all else. The story of the shared bed makes us think about the nature of this concept. It shows that privacy is a social construct that depends on wealth and technology. Looking back, we see how fragile human comfort can be. What seems to us to be an unshakable norm is the result of a long historical development. Our warm homes are a great achievement of civilization. This history teaches us to appreciate the simple things. Warmth, safety, privacy. These are not givens, but privileges won by previous generations. They lived in conditions that are difficult for us to even imagine. Their experience of fighting the cold is part of our shared history. It reminds us that progress does not happen by itself. Behind every comfortable thing we take for granted lies someone's struggle, someone's ingenuity, and someone's will to live. The memory of those cold nights and shared beds should make us more grateful for the world we live in and more sensitive to those who are still deprived of basic comforts today. We can see that the shared family bed in the Victorian era was not a quaint tradition, but a harsh and pragmatic solution to the problem of survival. Poor housing, expensive fuel, and pervasive cold left people with no other choice. They shared not just a bed, but the warmth that helped them survive until morning. This page of history shows how much our way of life and our ideas about what is normal have changed. What was a daily reality for millions seems almost unbelievable to us today. It makes us look at the things we are used to in a new way and appreciate the comforts that have become available to us. Please suggest topics for future videos that you would like to see on our channel in the comments. Which era or aspect of everyday life in the past interests you the most? And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on new research into the hidden pages of history.